Yes, call me. We're recording, John. Call me Clay. Hello. Welcome to the Gonzales Mitchell Show. I'm Clay Mitchell. Patrick is on assignment. Today, our guest is John Hodgson. He is the former uh, city attorney for the city of Annapolis. He was the former county attorney for Anne Arundel County. He was also a lawyer in private practice. John, welcome to the Gonzales Mitchell Show.
Thank you, Clay. It's going to be a lot of fun talking to you.
It is. Now, we don't have an agenda today. We're here to talk about old war stories and old political stories. And I understand you may have a story about Marvin Mandel.
Well, I've got a few of them, as a matter of fact. And let me tell you how that happens to be the case. You mentioned that I was attorney for the city of Annapolis. And that was an 8-year gig I had from 1986 to 1993. And boy, was I a kid in those days. Well, Annapolis City Hall is not far from Chicken Ruth's Deli. A lot of your listeners or viewers may know that place. It's on Main Street, and it used to be a real political hangout. All the politicians had a sandwich on the wall, as did I. Because I was there practically every morning. And because I was in there so frequently, Marvin Mandel also came in. And he would sit in the first booth on the right as you enter into the deli. And they called that the governor's booth. Right, and they called it that because when he was governor, he was there routinely.
It was his morning. It was his morning office.
It was, and they roped it off if he wasn't there, so that just anybody couldn't sit down in there. It was reserved for him. And of course, he had a personal relationship with Chick and Ruth Levitt, who owned the store. Anyway, I would go in there most mornings and get coffee and something to eat before I started my day in City Hall. And he and I got to know one another. And it would. And there's a guy who knew how to tell a story. He was very entertaining. His mind was crystal clear. And again, this is back in the, late 80s, maybe 88, 89, and right up till 93. And he loved telling a story, and he had a lot of stories to tell. And I'm going to share one with you that might have some interest beyond just you and me.
Sure.
And that's a story about how Spiro Agnew happened to be vice president of the United States.
Wow.
And it had more to do with Marvin than it did with Spiro. Now, I'm going to set the historical context for you. This was 1968. Agnew was elected governor of Maryland in 1966. And you'll know, I don't know if you'll remember, but that was the first elected governor who was a Republican for years.
Right.
Except for McKeldin.
Right.
Who went back and forth from governor to mayor of Baltimore to governor to mayor of Baltimore. Anyway, Agnew was, it was sort of a fluke how he became governor, but nevertheless, he was governor, and those years, late 60s, were turbulent time politically with civil rights, and they were burning Baltimore and Cambridge, if you may remember that. Rap Brown. Anyway, there was a little incident with Agnew that gave him some notoriety, where he did some pushback to a group of African Americans in his office, and they resented it, but it got him some notoriety. All right, so now, meanwhile, Richard Nixon is getting ready to. They're in the campaign for president. They haven't had the primary yet, and he's not been nominated. Here's the deal. As a result of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Southern Democrats, who were all very conservative and very much opposed to the Civil Rights Act, did not want to support the Democrats. And so they cut a deal with Richard Nixon leading up to the campaign. And the deal was this: Strom Thurmond, senator from South Carolina,
right,
cut a deal that he would support and bring his people to support Nixon. In exchange, he wanted the right to veto a vice presidential nominee. In other words, he wanted to be sure that the Republican ticket that he supported would not be dominated by Northern traditional Republicans like Nelson Rockefeller.
It's Strom Thurmond, if I'm correct, tried to run for president in the 40s as a Dixiecrat.
Yes, it was
which was a different Democrat altogether.
Yes, yeah, yeah. Probably, and that group probably was not far from the George Wallace Democrats,
right?
Which was, of course, much later than the Dixiecrat thing. But so anyway, so now you've got this deal. Nixon wants to satisfy this group of Southern Democrats who will. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know if they were still Democrats or going to become Republican or what. But he wanted them to support his candidacy. All right, so 2 people were suggested to Strom Thurmond as potential vice presidential candidates, and I don't know who they were, but there were 2, and he rejected both of them. One of the reasons they did. Nixon would have liked Nelson Rockefeller to have been on his ticket because he was worried that Nelson Rockefeller would run against him for the president, for the nomination. And in fact, he may have. I don't know if he did or not.
I think his name was actually mentioned at the convention in '68, I think.
Yeah. So Nixon is being frustrated. He can't find a vice president. So meanwhile, back in Annapolis, in Maryland, Marvin Mandel is the Speaker of the House of Representatives. And at that time, it was before the office of Lieutenant Governor had been created when the state constitution was revised in the late 60s. The reason that's significant is because the vacancy in the position of governor would be filled by the House of Representatives. Marvin believed, very comfortably, I'm sure, that if there was a vacancy in the governor's mansion and he was Speaker of the House, he would have no trouble getting the House of Representatives to elevate him into the governor's mansion.
Right. So
Marvin, ever the politician and ever the clever planner he was, called his friend Louise Gore. Now, Louise Gore is a name some of you, the Gore name, of course, you'll know from Al Gore, and I think she might have been his aunt. I'm not sure, but there was probably some kind of relationship between the Maryland Gores and the Tennessee Gores.
Right, right.
Marvin called her up and said, I've got an idea for you, Louise. Call your friend Strom Thurmond and suggest to Strom Thurmond that he offer the name of Spiro Agnew to Richard Nixon as his running mate.
What is a Spiro Agnew? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, it's funny you should ask, because when Spiro made that, when Strom Thurmond made that call to Richard Nixon, Nixon's response to him was, "Who's he?" Anyway, so he explained who he was, governor of Maryland, yada, yada. And so the call was made. Nixon didn't care as long as it was somebody who wasn't going to hurt his ticket and his candidacy. So Nixon said, okay. And then a little time passed, not much time. Marvin gets a call from Spiro Agnew. And Spiro says to Marvin, I'm going to be nominated as vice president. Marvin, who of course knew all this ahead of time, said, "Of what?" And he said, "Of the United States," and then said, "What should I do?"
Right.
And of course, Marvin, to finish out his little plan, said, "Of course, he should accept," and he did, and then he became vice president, and Marvin became governor of Maryland.
Right.
Marvin was a very popular governor, very popular politician on both sides of the aisle. As a matter of fact, it's often said that he picked Louise Gore as his opponent in the election in which he ran against him, because she would have known she couldn't have beaten him. But
Right.
anyway, that's, everyone, I think, in history who remember those days wonder what in the world could have happened to bring this man who no one ever knew of, from a small state that didn't have any real voting block. They couldn't bring many electoral votes to the election. How could this man get that? And this is the reason. That little outline I just gave you of all these little pieces falling together, the Voting Rights Act, the alienation of the Southern Democrats from the Democrat Party, the desire of that group to have a conservative, or someone at least who looks like a conservative, on the ticket with Nixon, Mandel's ambition to be governor. And so that's how that all happened. And of course, looking down the road from that, Watergate ensued.
Right.
In order to pave the way for an acceptable vice president, which had to happen before Nixon resigned. They had to get rid of Agnew, who was controversial. And so he of course, legitimately was prosecuted for corruption when he was, I think from the times he was county executive in Baltimore County.
And the people that prosecuted him were the nattering nabobs of negativism. I just want to point that out.
The nattering nabobs of negativism. That was a typical Agnew quote. No one else could have come up with that. Yeah. So anyway, I'm down at Chicken Ruth's Deli, drinking my coffee and having a bagel and talking to Marvin Mandel across the table from me. What a personable, just unaffected, likable guy to sit and have coffee with.
Right.
And I did it for a number of years. So just a little last bit on that. You hear a lot of stories in your life, and some of them are pretty incredible. Like this might have been sort of incredible. And I might not have thought about it again, but I heard this story that I just gave you more than once. It might have been more than twice, in separate, unrelated conversations with Marvin. That fact leads me to give it some credibility. And even on top of that, because I thought it was so interesting, I called my friend Bruce Bariano, who was a long time politician, and not a politician, but a lobbyist, which makes you a politician.
Right.
And a very, very close friend of Marvin's. And
Sure.
I went through this with him and asked him if he had heard this too. And he confirmed everything I've just said to you. So for what it's worth, your show is the first one that I know of to publicly announce the circumstances and the background to the appointment or the election of Spiro Agnew as Vice President of the United States.
That's why we're here, to break news stories like this.
And you do it every day.
I got to tell you, my father cut his teeth under the Mandel administration, and really, from his reorganization of government to everything else that he did, he really truly admired Marvin Mandel. I think his favorite eras that he served was Marvin Mandel and William Donald Schaefer.
Yeah.
Those were just dynamic times. They really were.
I met your father when I was city attorney. I don't know the circumstances. I think that your father was leaving that speakership
Right.
about that time.
December 93. Yeah.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
93. Okay. That was later than I thought.
Right.
But yeah, I got to know your dad. And of course, I would see him at Kent County every now and then. Now and then I would stop in at Vonnie's in
Right.
Kennedy, and
Right.
he'd be in there.
Yeah, they have great scrapple at Vonnie's, man.
You can't. Yeah, well,
it's called Molly's now, but
yeah, I know, it's
Yeah.
all different.
Right.
No, and it's quite a place now. It's
Yes.
it's almost like south of the border. So bad.
Yeah. I mean, you go to Kent County, you go to northern Kent County, you got to eat there. It's just it's a landmark.
Mm-hmm.
And remember when Vonnie's used to have that wagon on top of the roof?
Yeah.
It was like a farm wagon, just had Vonnie's across it.
I one summer when I was in college, I worked for Bramble, the Bramble
Bramble Construction.
On their asphalt paving crew,
Right.
and we paved the road from Vonnie's all the way down to Still Pond.
Right.
That was hot work out in the sun on that hot pavement. But Brambles and Vonnie's, they're old Kent County names.
And Still Pond, you can't. And interesting fact about Still Pond, in the early 1900s, that was the first town to let women vote before the Voting Rights Amendment was passed. I think it was the 20th Amendment.
The first
they were allowed to vote in a local election. That was the first time in Maryland anybody got to vote was Still Pond, Maryland.
Are they? But they're not even. They're not now. I don't think they're an incorporated municipality.
They're not. It might have been an county election, but
Betterton is
right. Betterton,
which is just down the road.
But Still Pond, they were ahead of their time, and there was a farm. Who was the fellow that signed Jackie Robinson? Gosh, I'm drawing a blank.
Oh, God, the owner of the.
He had a farm there.
Ricky, was that his name?
Gosh, I'm drawing a blank. But he had a farm there that Jackie Robinson used to go to. And that's another historical fact about my good old hamlet of Still Pond.
Well, my parents, when they were first married back in the 1930s, lived in Betterton for a while because there used to be a Chevrolet dealer in Betterton.
Wow.
Yeah. In fact, the building that used to be in, if you're riding into Betterton on the right, there's a small building, but it looks like a commercial thing. It's on the corner. That used to be a Chevrolet dealer.
Oh, my goodness. I didn't realize that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember going there in the mid 50s. Really? God, am I that old? Yeah. Sorry.
Well, we gotta have you back on. There's probably a million more stories you could tell, and I love hearing these.
Well, I'll tell you what, I got a bunch more stories, and if we run out of the ones I know, I'll make a few up.
All right. Well, John, by the clock on the wall, it's time for the show to finally wind down, and unfortunately, we're going to have to say goodbye, Patrick.
Bye, Patrick.
Goodbye, Patrick, wherever you are. And John, thank you for being on the show today.
I've had a lot of fun. I hope you'll have me back sometime.
Oh, I will. Certainly will. Thank you, John.
Thank you so much.